A very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Powering the growth of any nation's economy are the micro, small and medium enterprises, also known as the MSMEs. What are really the opportunities and obstacles here? Let us find out in our next plenary session. To moderate this particular session, I would like to call a person with a very unique distinction. When ADFIAP was held in India in the year 1984, he was a participant, and today we welcome him as our moderator. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Dr. Shailendra Narayan, Honorary Member ADFIAP, and also former Chairman and Managing Director of the Center for SME Growth and Development Finance. A very warm welcome to you, sir. If I may request you to kindly join us. May I now extend a very warm welcome to our eminent speakers for this session. May I invite them on stage. Firstly, Dato Syed Kamarul Zaman bin Dato SZBK Shahabuddin, Managing Director, Permadanan National Berhad, Malaysia. Datuk Muhammad Zamri Muhammad Ishaq, President and CEO of the Credit Guarantee Corporation, Malaysia Berhad. Dr. Sunil Shukla, Director, Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India. And we have with us Mr. Rajan Ashok Uttam Chandani, who is the Chairman and the CEO of Esquire Financing Incorporated, Philippines. May I request you to join me in extending a very warm welcome to our eminent panel here. If I may now request our session moderator, Dr. Narayan, to kindly make his opening remarks and moderate the session. Over to you, sir.
Let me stand and speak to you. Very good morning. Problem with me is that if I sit and speak, I forget what I have to speak. So I would prefer to stand before you and then speak. Number one. Number two is that, Bobby, somebody is taking the minutes of this session. If not, please, can you appoint somebody for that? And thirdly is that we have 45 minutes. Now, from quarter to 12, we'll go on to 12:30. And we will certainly abide by the time limitations which we have decided in this session to be observing. So these are the preconditions to us to begin with the session. In Indian mythology, we have a very great significance of the number, and that is number 5. And see, these are my jewels here, 4. And 1, I don't know what I will call myself, but I add to the number 4 plus 1, it makes 5. And it's a very auspicious number in Indian mythology here. So I think you all, sir, will contribute in such a way that our minutes become very, very significant for Bobby to put it in the, are you calling it a Delhi chapter or whatever is that? So the main topic today, it would be DFIs towards promoting and undertaking sustainable and inclusive development. Now DFIs, you all are the owners, you all are the promoters and managers of DFIs. That stands for Development Financial Institutions. Now, why I have deciphered is Development Financial Institution is that the first work or the first responsibility of DFIs is developmental. That is the point I wanted to make it clear. And then comes the financing. So how do we combine these together is one of a very Herculean task today for our the honorable speakers here to establish that. We had given about 4 very important topics for our precondition and then coming before you. The first will be the role of DFIs in bringing about the inclusive and sustainable development. That is one of the points. And what will be the role of DFIs what had been and what would be. That is one of the things. The second one is that whether DFIs are able to play their role as mandated under this word, inclusive development and sustainable development. The third one, how do we make the characteristics of any DFI relevant to the society and the changing context? And what are the competitions coming from other agencies, other agents of the financial sector? That is the third point. And fourthly, how far the entrepreneurship development programs or entrepreneurship itself in MSME sector would correlate its activities with the DFIs so that it becomes much more contributing towards development of the activities of DFIs. So with these four cardinal principles, we will oscillate our discussions today. And particularly, Bobby had sent me a letter saying that we must convert it into a talk show. So let's convert that into a talk show. So we can modulate ourselves very well in this. So with this, first I will call them by first name, because last night you had their good details. All of them have received the prizes. So the first one is Syed. The second one is Zamri. The third one is Sunil. And the fourth one is Mr. Rajan. So these are my four colleagues here. With this, we will go by modality that we will discuss all these in ourselves and then throw the issues open for discussion or question and answer by the entire honorable delegates here. So we will take about 3-4 minutes each and 10 minutes for you nearly, and we will finish sharp at 12:45. Thank you very much. So first we invite Zamri. In your opinion, whether DFIs would be able to play an inclusive and development and sustainable role in the stage of today when DFI's role is getting blurred? Yeah. Yeah. I have combined these two. You can speak about the cardinal roles of the DFI and whether they are getting blurred today, okay, for sustainable and developmental growth.
Thank you, Doctor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here today. Now, with regard to the cardinal role, we at CGC, and believe all of you, is that we must always stay, or rather keep to the mandate that our organization has been formed. That is a true north. For example, in the case of CGC Malaysia, our mandate is to provide guarantees to financial institutions in return for them to provide financing or loans to the financial institution. And we have remained true to that mandate for the last 45 years. And as most of you saw in the corporate video that was shown last night, CGC has helped over 330,000 SMEs in Malaysia, and we have issued over 15 billion US dollars worth of guarantees and financing. And of that amount, over 93% are guarantee business. So we have remained true to that. The only time that when CGC Malaysia goes into direct financing is going to uncharted waters. For example, in May of 2015, we went into direct financing for startups. As the rule of thumb says, startups, 90% of them fail. And what we decided to do is that we created a fund. We put in about 15 million US dollars as a pilot test to provide financing to startups. No collateral, no track record. We would be able to lend them at least the minimum 10,000 US dollars, and the highest would be 100,000 US dollars. And so far, And when we embark on that pilot, we were expecting the NPL or NPF ratio to be 30%. Today, which is over 28 months that the fund were disbursed, our NPL is still very much under control. It is below 10%. So, and we actually wanted to prove a case to the Malaysian finance industry to say that, if we do the proper credit assessment, knowing the customer and really getting to know what they want to do, we can actually do well in startups. That is number one. And when we proven our case, we have actually started a few banks, including, well, I cannot name them for obvious reasons, but 2 large banks have really engaged with us, whereby they went into startups and we are guaranteeing them now. Yeah, that's number one. Number 2 is sometime in 2015, middle of 2015, we went into financing for lady entrepreneurs. As most of us know that ladies, they are more disciplined than men, and we also proved that. Yeah, and again, my point here is that when you talk about cardinal rule, we must always stay to the mandate that we were formed, and we will not go into direct financing unless there is a good reason to do that. Thank you.
One issue which I would like to raise for your kind consideration and also of the House is that, do you think that the cardinal function of a DFI is getting blurred today? And do they receive competition from other agencies of the financial system?
Okay. Now, with regard to Malaysia, I would say that we have a rather comprehensive SME ecosystem. Why is that we have that? Now, way back in 2006, Malaysia formed what we call as the National SME Development Council. It is chaired by the Prime Minister. We meet him twice a year. And there is also a high-level task force which is chaired by the Chief Secretary to the government. They meet every quarter. And in that council, we have, if I recall correctly, about 13 ministries, yeah, from trade, finance, agriculture, so on and so forth. Even the governor of Central Bank is also on that council. Now, this is where we make sure that the lines that you mentioned just now is not blurred. Like, I know what CGC needs to do, Syed knows what PNAS is supposed to do, and Agro Bank and SME Bank in Malaysia knows what they're supposed to do. And then we do not blur the line, so to speak. Yeah, and we leverage on each other. And another example would be capacity building. We do capacity building in a small way, but we actually leverage on other stakeholders in the SME ecosystem Malaysia, such as the SME Corp, such as SEDA under the SME Bank, such as the InScan. It is a unit under the Prime Minister's department. So, we try to make sure that, we do not cross into each other's area. But there are times where, such things happen, and the CEOs will sit down and actually discuss on who is to take the primary role, who is to take the secondary role.
Okay. I leave in this context 2 issues for discussion and for remarks from the House, honorable delegates here. That how far for a development financial institution it is necessary, or it is very, very competitive to get resources as compared to the commercial banking sector, number 1. And number 2, whether that is coming in the way to play its role more importantly in the area of inclusive development and sustainable development. I leave this thought with you. We'll come back on this. Now, second is onto my left, Syed sitting. And Syed, I have an issue for you, and that is whether the DFI today are able to play inclusive and sustainable development role. And number 2, that if not, whether entrepreneurship can make a dent in this regard.
Okay, I'm Syed, and I'm with PNAS. First of all, in terms of DFIs, you have DFIs who obtain funds from the government, and there are also DFIs which are owned by the government. We are a different animal where we are owned by the Ministry of Finance. We started with a certain paid-up capital, and that's it. So the idea of why we were established, the mandate that we had was that our role was that in how do we use this company, which is a DFI, in creating entrepreneurship. So our main mandate was to create entrepreneurships. And one of the ways of doing it is by providing them with financing for them to basically mend for themselves. But the question is that one is providing financing for maybe micro or even middle financing, which has a certain risk factor where you're dealing with people who have never done business before. And that's why the government of Malaysia decided that why do we do that, but let's focus on franchise. Because they said that franchise is easier to succeed compared to a normal business. Because it has its formula, it has its systems, and it's supposed to work. But there's always a risk element in any business that you do, despite whether it's a franchise business or non-franchise business. And the question that we always talk about is about sustainability. When we provide financing, there's always an element of risk in our financing that we give. And we still have that mandate that we still have to do that. And the mandate that we have is that you do the financing, you develop the entrepreneurships, but don't ask money from me. So that was quite different. So what we did in PNAS, in trying to be sustainable, is that we had two segments. One segment of PNAS would be basically looking at the developmental role, which is creating entrepreneurship. And the other portion of PNAS looks into how do we make money to support the developmental role. And so far, we have been successful in creating entrepreneurship. So far, we have financed more than 1,800 business people, and yet we still have the money internally to invest in projects and make money to support the financing portfolios. So we basically have a balancing act to do. One is developmental role where we charge a fee of financing fee of between 4.5 to 5%, and another portion where we do investment where we get return between 8 to 12%. So that's how we balance our act. But we know for a fact, if we were just to focus on providing financing for franchise or for business, there's always an element of risk because in business you need to have knowledge. So what we did was we created a fee-based income where we came up with an academy to train people on business, specifically on franchise or business per se. And it also do soft skills and also the technical skills that we need in business per se. So what we did was that we looked at the whole value chain to make sure that we have the fee-based income and the investment income to support the financing income where you may have higher NPLs in terms of financing. So this is what we did in PNAS. And we keep on coming out with new things because it encourages people to become entrepreneurs. They want people to fend for themselves instead of hoping for the government to give them employment. You become employers instead of employees. So we've done programs with universities, and even last year we did a program, the one which we got a merit award, which was VEST, where we were able to basically create entrepreneurs among students. And when they graduate, what happened was that instead of just going out and working for somebody, they really became entrepreneurs. And we took the responsibility that for those who were in the finalists, PNAS would either finance them or even get involved in the company via equity. So among the 3 finalists that we have, we are really part of them, And we hope that these companies that we groom can be something sustainable, where they become the employers instead of the employees, and create opportunities for people in Malaysia to get employment.
You have brought to fore two very important issues, and that relates to maintaining the viability of the DFI. Now, the first one, you said risk mitigation, number one. And number two is that how do you sort as between your products to make the cost effective or cost relevant to the market demands. So these are the two very important issues which are today certainly impacting on the DFIs elsewhere. So we would like to know very quickly how do you recommend that, and then we should take back this lesson home and try to implement them in our own work situation. Thank you.
I think what we have done in PNAS, it's not something that was easy. It took years of experimenting. And I think what normally happens to people is that whenever you do something, you always like to reinvent the wheel. And we had to go through the whole process of how do we develop and how do we finance people. And at the end of the day, that in anybody that you finance, you want to basically look at mitigating the risks and ensure that you have the least NPLs as possible. So it was a learning experience. It was a journey for PNAS. And there were certain things that we came up with. We tried to maintain the financing costs as low as possible. But we knew for the fact that the degree of success would depend on the knowledge that they had. So one key element here is knowledge. You need to have knowledge in anybody who wants to do business. And when we talk about franchise business, it's a business that has already been around for quite some time. It's already been proven. Therefore, when you have a business like that, you're already, in one way or another, trying to minimize the risk that this business model would work. In normal circumstances, if you have a business which operates today, in 5 years, the business that operates today will cease to operate in 5 years. 80% will cease to operate in 5 years. However, if you take a franchise business today, in 5 years' time, there's an 80% success rate in a franchise business. If you follow the right model, you follow the right SOPs and all that. And I believe the combination between education and looking at the knowing your customers and look at the margin of financing that provide will determine whether you succeed or you fail. We've tried it before when we provided big margins of financing. But at the end of the day, we found that the lower the margin of financing that you gave, the higher the success rates of the business. So that's my take to that.
That's very fine. But we have something to ask Zamri about it. He has some ideas. Could you please?
Yeah, this is with regard to question number 2 on bringing down the cost for SME. If I could get the... Can you play the video, please? I have a quick 30 seconds video which talks about the platform that we recently launched. This will help in reducing costs of finding information for MSMEs. While they are looking at it, let me fill you in on what happened. On sometime middle of last year, CDC Malaysia, or the Central Bank of Malaysia came out with this idea of coming up with an aggregator, and we were mandated to come up with this. Basically, an SME online financing platform, whereby, what we did was we created a platform which is something like what Trivago is for us today. When you want to look for a hotel, you go to Trivago, Trivago gives you the best rate. So what we did was, we came up with MSME, and that platform, now, currently in Malaysia, or most parts of the world, let's play the video.
Introducing IMSME by CGC for SMEs. Log on to imsme.com.my, then follow 4 easy steps. First, share your financing requirements. Second, describe your business. Third, log in. Lastly, choose the best product for you. Within 2 days, you'll get a call from your preferred financier. It's that easy.
Okay, that is our 30 seconds commercial. Now, I think, when you look at it, it makes much more simpler. There are just 4 easy steps. You go into the platform and you key in your particulars and we will find your match. Currently, we have 14 financial institutions as well as developmental financial institutions who are on board with this. So once the MSME key in their particulars, the platform will then match their requirements with what Agrobank has to offer, what Maybank has to offer, and then the MSME will then click on. Within 2 days, the FIs or DFIs will call the MSMEs to take it further. Now, this is talking about reducing costs. Sometime about, I think July 2014, there was a study done by Harvard Business School where they found out that entrepreneurs takes at least 25 hours to look for this kind of information. Like in Malaysia, before MSME, if we want to find out about what Maybank has to offer, we have to go to Bank A, Bank B, Bank C. We have stopped all that. So with that, we reduce cost. Yeah. Now, I would like to add on 2 other things, or rather 3 critical factors with regard to this matter. Number 1 is good record keeping. And yesterday, the Honorable Indian Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs, he did mention the importance of paying taxes. And now, when an MSME key in the financial information into our platform, if they manipulate or dress down their financials, I mean, they will only get X amount of financing. So if they fully disclose, and of course, they will get the optimum financing. So that's number 1. Good record keeping is very important for MSMEs, and they must be transparent. Now, with regard to the financial institutions, what is important for them is to make fast decision. For small businesses, speed is very, very important. They can't wait. Yeah, so that is, whenever the bank is presented with an application, if they can do it, say yes. If they can't, say no. Coming back to MSME, of course we will have situation, or we could have situation where there is no match found. Why? Because the SMEs lack credibility. They have no track record. Now with that, we have actually, the system will then identify, and the MSMEs will be channeled to our capacity building partners. Currently, we have 3 capacity building partners. Firstly is the Malaysian Institute of Accountant. Number 2 is SEDA, which is an arm of the SME Bank. And number 3 is the Institute of Entrepreneurship in Malaysia under the Prime Minister's Department. Thank you.
Oh, that's very good deliberation, I must say. You have touched upon the 2 very important issues. From both these speakers, it comes out that DFI has to be entrepreneurial in raising the resources, in reducing the cost, and that is the most vexing issue today in the realm of development of DFIs. So I leave this thought with you. We may discuss it. Now, when we have touched upon entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurship takes two shapes. One, the DFI itself has to be entrepreneur, and number 2, it has also to go along entrepreneurial activities. So I have 2 represented here. Rajan is entrepreneur and he runs his own company. He will let you know that. And Sunil is the director of the Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India. That's one of the premier institutes. So both of them will touch upon this issue. Rajan, can you please also introduce your company in a few words? Please.
Sure. I'm Rajan Uttamchandani from the Philippines. We started our company actually in the early 70s as a trade finance company, and my father actually founded that company. I veered into the micro and SME space in 2007 as soon as I left the US. I started with the model of Grameen Foundation in microfinance, but it was very hard to make money in microfinance because of the challenges of scalability. So quickly I realized that the gap is in the SME segment. Today we have about 10,000 clients in the SME segment, and we are the most profitable NBFC in the country. And So being a DFI doesn't necessarily mean being not profitable. It's actually sustainable. So with that, I turn the floor back to you if you have any questions.
Yes. You have yourself given question and I cannot answer that. Because his point is that DFI cannot be taken as an entity which is not economical. Am I right to say?
Yes.
Now, given the paucity of resources at comparable rates from the market, how do you justify your statement?
So I'll answer that with an acronym.
Okay.
The acronym I'll answer is DFI. DFI should develop, focus, and innovate.
Fantastic.
So develop, rather than competing with the large banks and large institutions, you can actually partner. So we're actually partners with Land Bank and DBP who are represented at this conference today. The government actually mandates the banks to lend 10% of their portfolio to SMEs in the country. SMEs contribute about 35% to GDP, but they're about 65% of the workforce. So they really lack access to capital. And the banks have a very tough time lending to the SME segment who don't have collateral or the track record that's needed. So companies like us that exist actually serve as a conduit for the large banks and medium-sized banks to lend to the SME sector. And this is also in compliance with the BSP or the central bank's mandate. Focus on your specialty. Don't try to be in every business. A lot of DFIs lose focus in their core purpose and they veer away from their core product. And that's when you start seeing DFIs start focusing on different product segments that are not in their space. We're a single product company. We provide non-collateral working capital to SMEs to be able to build, buy, or bridge their business needs. And the last is innovation. 10 years ago, our vision was to open 100 branches to be able to reach SMEs throughout the country. Technology is changing so fast that this is not the name of the game anymore. The Philippines, like I mentioned earlier, is the Facebook capital of the world next to the US. We have the most number of Facebook users outside of the US. So online marketing, click and mortar, has actually become the name of the game. Change is the only constant since business has started. And innovation is really the key to being able to adapt to the times of the fintech as well as the times that are compelling. In terms of scarcity of resources, I think approaching the banks as a partner rather than looking at them as competition allows you to actually have access to a larger pool of resources. So using them as distribution partners as well as a wholesale partner rather than trying to compete directly with them.
Now, Rajan, you have very well established your statement, viability of your statement. Now, let me ask you, are you in a private sector or public sector?
We're actually a private company.
Private company. Now, world over, you will find, I think you all will agree, that the DFIs have been incorporated in the public sector or supported by the government, isn't it? Now, here is an entrepreneur who has set up development financial institution as a private company. Private company financing MSMEs, basically micro sector, as also the project finance, investments, etc., for a long-term need of the industry and other sectors of the economy. Now, these are very important issues for all of us to ponder. How is he becoming viable? Because I tell you, pardon me for saying, they generally say, I am not saying, they generally say that MSMEs are financed by three types of persons. Number one, friends. Number two, family members. And the third one are the fools who finance this. Now, I wouldn't say who are that section, who falls in that segment. So, this is the right or wrong maybe, this is the impression of the economy as a whole. Now I feel Rajan presents a very interesting case study here. His company. He is in a private sector, which is unknown for the development financial institutions, number one. Number two, he raises the resources at a cost-effective rate. Number two, still he is viable. And thirdly, he is subserving the cause of the micro, small and medium enterprises. So these are his salient points. Sir, I'll come back to you. You are so entrepreneurial. How come this gentleman who is sitting next to you, he is the virtually the messiah of training here, entrepreneurship in this part of the globe, I should say. They have been working for last 35 years in India, ADFIAP. So let's hear from him how far entrepreneurship or the training of entrepreneurship development programs goes along with the DFI's role. How do you combine? How do you see that? Whether that can be combined, number one. And what new pattern you think should be adopted if there is some gaps still to fill in? These are two very basic questions. But I must say that you are the beginning and you are at the growth rate. So let us hear you.
Thank you, sir. As you have already introduced EDII, it is 35-year-old institute based out of Ahmedabad, which is on the western side of the country. And we are incidentally promoted by All India Financial Institutions, by and large DFIs. So we have been dealing with DFIs on one hand and entrepreneurs on the other hand, and work very closely with both the segments. Sir, as you said that the role of DFIs, I see that DFIs are very, very important role that they are playing, and they have to play the world over in achieving sustainable development goals and ensuring the inclusive growth, including empowerment, economic growth, all those things which are very, very important for DFIs. And what has been found out that promotion of entrepreneurship, particularly promotion of MSMEs, are probably the most cost-effective tool in helping DFIs achieving these goals. But what is happening that while DFIs are continuing to work for their objectives and entrepreneurship development institutions are left to fend for themselves because of the changing priorities of DFIs, increasingly it is becoming very, very difficult to align the objectives of the both. And what I would suggest that it is necessary for both the DFIs and entrepreneurship development institutions to come together, actively engage with each other, for ED institutions also to understand the roles of DFIs for different countries, different locations, different regions, and for DFIs also to take the services of specialized institutions working for entrepreneurship development and engage with them. Entrepreneurship development is not post-investment. In fact, it starts prior to the investment, creating a conducive environment, socializing, sensitizing the environment, creating awareness, then helping people achieve the objectives of startups or emergence of entrepreneurs, helping them survive. Because first 1,000 days are very, very critical for entrepreneurs. If 3 years, roughly about 1,000 days, if they can survive, they can hope to survive for longer, and finally taking them to growth paths. This is the role of entrepreneurship development institution to customize the program, and DFIs can engage them, DFIs can help them charting out various specialized programs. What we call is non-financial services. Very briefly, my colleague on the panel, Mr. Saeed, also touched upon that it is not only the financing role of institutions, but also non-financial services, that business development support at different stages. And these are pre-startup, then mentoring, hand-holding, market linkages, technical support. A lot of such supports are required. So DFIs can help institutions charting out different programs and offering these programs, and that is how they can support each other. Also, what I feel that at times, because of various reasons, because of changes in the larger macro environment, some MSMEs come into distress mode, or not necessarily distress, but they are looking for change, they are looking for growth, they are looking for diversification. So DFI should also help MSMEs in this direction and allow them to either close down, look for growth, and if it happens, particularly those who are in difficulty, and because of difficulties of these MSMEs, an environment is created that all the MSME sector is there into distress mode, probably they can be able to come out of that as well. And I believe that DFIs can play very, very important role over there.
Excellent. Sunil, you have thrown one idea for our consideration that we will do now, is that his point is that both must run concurrently as also have a very close collaboration, so that right from day one till the growth stage, the clients, the MSMEs of the DFIs should get the benefit of finance, not only finance, but hand-holding, non-financial services. Is that right, what I'm saying?
That's absolutely right.
Now,
very important.
Bobby, with your permission, I'll take spill over 5 more minutes, okay? We started late. So, coming back to the honorable distinguished participants, I said we have kept 3 issues for your consideration. Number 1 is that whether DFIs can sustain the competition and yet develop the business for inclusive and sustainable development. Anybody who can, please, feel free. Sir, there is one precondition which Bobby has told me, that those who speak shall get lunch. Please, we crave for your remarks. Whether DFIs are relevant today and whether they are going to continue in future. That's a yet simplified question. Please. No? Yes, sir. Please get up. Introduce yourself and...
Nagaraj Rao from PFAN. As you see, the other side of the coin is the ability of the institutions to bear the risks associated with lending.
Yes, that's it.
And the way the balance sheet lending has given way to cash flow lending is something that the development institutions are yet to understand fully. If you see the Indian context, our big developmental institutions have disappeared. They have become universal banking. Except for SIDBI, today we don't have developmental financial institutions in the country. Given that, unless the developmental institutions have the ability to take the additional risk for the companies which are in the startup stage or thereafter, one of the key things that they need to do is how to release the projects which have passed that stage and create capacity within themselves to take on new projects. How do you, if, for example, in SIDBI, if you are staying with the same client for the last 20 years, how do you create space for the new person? How much capital can you put in? So therefore, the idea is to create capacity within what we have by bringing in new people, that is the new customers, and releasing the people who have benefited from your association. Thanks.
Very good. He has raised, yes sir, please go ahead.
Sir, you have a question about DFI, but what I say, under the corporate social responsibility, it is the job of every commercial undertaking, whether government or private, they have to put in corporate social responsibility. The funds is created profit, and they have to put in 2% of that under. And many of the entrepreneurial activities are covered under corporate social responsibility. So it is now a mandatory effort by the government also. Is it so?
If you want my response on this,
Yeah.
CSR is very important pool of resources for social good. That is okay. But willy-nilly now, all these companies which are mandated to create a CSR, they are having their own activities. They don't lend to DFI. That's my friends have been getting that problem. Now the financial engineering will be like this. How do you channelize the industrial sector CSR pool of resources to the development financial institution? Am I right, sir? So that is the point which you may kindly consider, and we can, at lunch, we can decide on this. Number 2. The second question is that it emerges that given certain safeguards, the DFIs have to play or will play in future their inclusive and sustainable development. DFIs are sustainable. Is that okay? Is that okay? Please raise your hand. Is that okay? Yeah, that is okay. So that is the point which the first one is that. The second point is that through financial re-engineering, as my colleagues have done in Malaysia, can you reduce the cost and make it cost effective for the ultimate borrowers? The second question is this. Or any other question or remarks you would like to make connected with this issue of costing and resources? Do you think anybody, please? My own perception is that this is a very vexing question and issue. And I must compliment my colleagues who have tried that very well in Malaysia. Rajan, would you contribute to this idea? Because this is the crux of the problem, that the DFIs are today converting themselves into universal banks. And the government is not going to pump in so much of money into the DFI sector because they have other priorities as well. So this is the consensus today, that if we have to see DFIs existing in future, they have to mop up the resources from the open market and yet be economical. Okay? So this is the second one. And the third one is very important, what Sunil has raised that, and all of them earlier endorsed the view, that the DFIs have to run concurrently with the specialized institutions for entrepreneurship development. Here, the word specialized I have on purpose added here, is that because today, as you will find, everybody conducts EDP. They will hire some hotel, run some program for 2 days and create entrepreneurs. That is doing more disservice rather than service to the society. So it is a very specialized job, like any medical practitioner. And they have to go through that. Because it has not only the socio-economic elements attached to that. Just imagine a company which goes bust. He has to, what mental, psychological complexities he would be facing with. That there is a shame to not to succeed in the business. When he goes out, it's a shame throughout in the society. The banks will not entertain him. Now, how do you psychologically train them? Hey, that is not the problem. Come out, and with a revigorated zeal, you jump into the fray again. And that's the job of a specialized institution. So it's not that easy. So right from creating a good entrepreneurs for DFIs as a client, which should be trained, viable, vibrant clients they would get, they have to run concurrently by holding hand, so that in each phase of life, business cycle, they have to run concurrently and yet put them on the growth path. So this is the who did not touch anybody, the most vulnerable but vibrant, resilient section of the society, and that's the women entrepreneurship. That is today rising, because yesterday I was seeing an advertisement somewhere, a lady stitching on the hand held sewing machine. I was asking Sunil, why do we always advertise now like this? Women are much more in the sky now. They are at height rather than stitching with some sort of a small frocks or pants or something like that to subsist their two children. This is not the image today of a woman entrepreneur. There is a very good, you might come across, there is a very good advertisement in the plane that two modern boys sit and they were saying what ladies can do, this, that, and the aircraft, the captain announces, this is Sushmita Mukherjee, that means a lady's name, huh? That is so Miss So-and-so, your captain is speaking, and tighten your belt and all those things. So that was a shock for everybody. Me, the first flight I took when it was captained by a lady, I also got a little bit of thoughts in my mind whether we are going to land properly. But today, see, we are seeing it is piloted by ladies in NASA. NASA, all the space aircrafts. And we have a lady from India who has done that. You must be knowing that. But not connected with India only. It is the entire Asia Pacific. All ladies are rising. All ladies are rising. And you know, I would raise a question here. And that is, God created man first or woman first? That's the question. At least this you must answer, please, to earn lunch. God created man first or woman? If you were to ask me the answer, I would say God created man first before woman. Why? You create a draft first before creating masterpiece. And that's the end of it. Thank you very much. Oh, still. Sir, kindly wrap up. Yes, I am wrapping up. Thank you. I took permission for 5 minutes. Thank you. Sunil, thank you. Rajan, thank you very much.
Thank you. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude the session. We thank our panelists very much for the deliberations discussing the entire gamut of MSMEs and their role in playing a catalyst in a nation's growth. Please join me in extending a very warm hand to our session moderator and as well as our speakers. Before we wrap up, we would like to present mementos, as is the norm and tradition. May we now present the ADFIAP plaque to our session moderator, Dr. Shailendra Narayan. Thank you, sir, for leading the discussions and